After 3 weeks of waging war, Ukraine and Russia are finally on the negotiation table. After 4 rounds of inconclusive talks that you're already aware about, the two nations have come down to a 15-point peace plan. Will the delegations from both the sides, from both the nations, broker truce? That's the big question. Take a look.
After 21 days of raging war, there is some hope for truce. Russia and Ukraine are finally in a mood to negotiate. After 4 inconclusive rounds of talks, the 5th one seemed to be a step in the direction of peace. Russia and Ukraine are now trying to chalk out a compromise formula, including neutrality status for Ukraine as one of the options. Under neutral status, Ukraine would become part of European Union, but not NATO, like Austria and Sweden. Kremlin has given the green signal to this option.
Он сейчас, по большому счету, он сейчас всерьез обсуждается в увязке, конечно же, с гарантиями безопасности. Это ровно то, что вот президент Путин говорил в феврале на одной из своих пресс-конференций. Любые возможные варианты, любые общеприемлемые.
Kyiv, however, has ruled out the Russian proposal. Ukraine wants a legally binding security pact signed by international partners. Ukrainian and Russian delegations have come up with the 15-point tentative peace plan. It lists the issue that needs to be resolved before a compromise. These include Ukraine declaring neutrality, limiting the Ukrainian armed forces, renouncing Kyiv's ambitions to join NATO, and prohibiting Ukraine from hosting foreign military bases in exchange of security. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has claimed the talks are heading in the right direction.
Це важливо. Складно, але важливо, тому що будь-яка війна завершується угодою. Зустрічі тривають. Як мені доповідають, позиції на переговорах звучать вже реалістичніше. Проте ще необхідний час, щоб рішення були в інтересах саме України.
While talks are going on, Russia's relentless bombing of Ukraine continues. The question everyone is asking now is, how soon can the two warring nations reach an agreement? Bureau Report, India Today.
After 21 days of ferocious Russia-Ukraine war, there is now hope for truce that is being seen. This after Ukrainian President Zelenskyy acknowledged that Ukraine will not become a NATO member. Ukraine's bid to get NATO membership was at the heart of this crisis. Zelenskyy also said that he sees room for compromise in ongoing talks with Russia. On the other hand, Kremlin has shown signs of willingness to engage in negotiations. Here's a report.
Ukraine has suffered an unprecedented human tragedy in the face of the Russian invasion. Now, after 21 days of fighting, there is hope of a truce. The man who is leading the war against mighty Vladimir Putin, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy, says he sees room for compromise in talks with Russia. This comes as Moscow has stepped up bombardment of Kyiv, targeting even residential areas.
І працювати кожному на своєму місці, кожному, в тому числі нашим представникам, нашій делегації у переговорах з Російською Федерацією. Це важливо. Складно, але важливо, тому що будь-яка війна завершується угодою. Зустрічі тривають. Як мені доповідають, позиції на переговорах звучать вже реалістичніше. Проте ще необхідний час, щоб рішення були в інтересах саме України.
The main provocation for the war was Ukraine's bid to get membership of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Zelenskyy has said Ukraine will not become a member of NATO.
Зрозуміло, що Україна не є членом.
We realize that Ukraine will not become a member of NATO. We understand this. We are adequate people. Kyiv needs new formats of interaction with the West and separate security guarantees.
Я радий, що наш народ починає це розуміти.
Earlier, Russia's foreign minister had said Moscow does not aim to overthrow the Kyiv government and it hopes to achieve significant progress through talks. Zelenskyy has climbed down and is no longer interested in NATO membership. Kremlin has shown signs of willingness to engage in negotiations. With both nations making climb down, diplomacy, it seems, will succeed in ending the war that has cost both nations heavily. Bureau Report, India Today.
The Russia-Ukraine war has been raging for 3 weeks. Moscow continues to rain missiles on Ukraine. Outmanned and outgunned Kiev is still holding fort. While the diplomatic talks are on, the world is asking when and how is this war going to even end? India Today has decoded the 10 possible scenarios in which the war may just end. Here's a report.
Three weeks and peace is still a distant dream in Ukraine. Cities continue to be bombarded relentlessly by Russian missiles. As the humanitarian crisis deepens, India Today decodes the 10 possible scenarios in which the war could end. Scenario 1. Putin bombs Ukraine into submission at a massive human cost and installs a puppet government in Kyiv. Scenario 2. Zelenskyy is forced to quit and a new government takes over in Ukraine. Scenario 3. Kyiv is made neutral, irrespective of who rules it, or Ukraine is demilitarized like Austria. Scenario 4. Putin is forced to halt what he calls military operations with altered status quo, allowing talks and diplomacy to take effect. Scenario 5. Ukraine is forced to recognize the two breakaway regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, as well as Kherson, as independent regions captured by Russian forces. Scenario 6. Putin escalates war by using chemical weapons or targeting West's arms depots in neighboring Poland, prompting NATO to get involved in the war directly. Scenario 7. Putin scales back his goals in the face of a crumbling domestic economy, and Ukraine becomes what Afghanistan was to Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev, or the US and its allies after 2001. Scenario 8. Ukraine registers an unlikely heroic victory with continued little weapon support and humanitarian aid supplies from the West. Scenario 9. Sanctions by the West cripple Russia's economy, making Putin extremely unpopular, leading to an uprising in his country or even a coup taking place. Scenario 10. Cornered by NATO and the European Union and depleted of weaponry, a frustrated Putin goes for nuclear strikes, potentially leading to World War III and widespread catastrophe. Bureau Report, India Today.
Bruised and battered Ukraine refuses to bow down. Despite relentless Russian strikes, Ukrainian spirit to fight back remains undeterred. The war-torn nation is doing everything it can to stall the Russian advances, even as the enemy troops encircle Ukrainian capital Kiev. Here's a detailed report.
Three weeks of hellscape. A ravaged country, flattened and punished by a superpower. Its capital under siege. Armed forces in disarray. Cities burning. But Ukraine continues to show remarkable resilience. Ukrainian guns are far from falling silent. These night images of incredible Ukrainian counter-strike. These night images of incredible Ukrainian counter-strike show how the overwhelmed, outmanned and outgunned nation is still fighting back. Still taking the war into enemy camps. With a brave and determined fight back. The barrage of attacks so far successful in stalling a full-blown takeover of capital Kyiv. By the far superior and much better armed Russian invading force. Ukraine soldiers with tank-killing guns were seen destroying Russian armored carriers and tanks with the trademark Z symbols. The Ukrainian projectiles landing with deadly precision, taking out the Russian combat vehicles. Ukrainian defense also released video of Russian supplies and columns of equipment for its convoy in outskirts of Kyiv, coming under massive bombardment. Drone images capturing the full impact of large-scale explosions.
You know, Ukrainian forces are highly motivated. They're fighting on their own ground, and they're also highly mobile, unlike the Russian forces, which are sort of not mobile at all, really.
While fighting back hard, Ukraine has not abandoned peace efforts. President Zelenskyy asserted once again that his country has no plan to join NATO.
We realize that Ukraine will not become a member of NATO. We understand this. We are adequate people. Kyiv needs new formats of interaction with the West and separate security guarantees.
Bruised, battered, bleeding, yet biting back. Can Ukraine still do the unthinkable? With Rajesh Pawar in War Zone Kyiv. Bureau Report, India Today.
Relentless attacks, bombardments and civilian killings. The gory side of destruction has become synonymous to Russia-Ukraine war, even as Ukraine continues to defend the motherland for 21 days. Missile attacks in Kiev and strikes in Lviv paint a truly disturbing picture of the war front. Here's more to it.
Death and destruction everywhere. From capital city Kyiv,
complete building has been destroyed, and there was another blast which I saw just before this. It was in the middle of a road. Nearby buildings were damaged, but it fell on a broad road, so not much casualties. But here I believe few people have died and a lot of them were injured.
to Ukraine's western city of Lviv.
Air raid sirens up again, blaring in the city of Lviv. People have been going into the bomb shelters. Not many, quite a few of the apartments over here do not have bomb shelters, but the parking and the basements are where they're moving.
Russian missiles are raining misery. This four-story residential building in Kharkiv was reduced to rubble in seconds, killing at least 2 people. Ukraine has alleged Russian airstrikes have made evacuation attempts dangerous. The relentless Russian assault and the West's risk-averse assistance has forced Ukraine to climb down. The country has reaffirmed it will not join NATO.
4 high-rise buildings in Kyiv were bombed this morning. Dozens of people were dead. They shell schools and universities. It is clear that Ukraine is not a member of NATO. We understand that. We are rational people. For years, we have heard about the alleged open door policy, but we have already heard that we will not go in there.
While Russian forces are advancing, the war is proving a costly affair for Moscow. The UK has imposed sanctions on 370 more Russian elites. Other US allies are also expanding sanctions to cover more Russian firms and oligarchs.
It's important for Canadians and the world to know that Canada will continue supporting Ukraine and its independence, integrity, sovereignty, including its right to defend itself.
Russia has hit back. It has vowed to reduce dependence on the West.
We will solve the problem, and the solution will be to no longer depend on our Western partners, be it governments or companies that are acting as tools of Western political aggression against Russia instead of pursuing the interest of their businesses. We will make sure that we never again find ourselves in a similar situation and that neither some Uncle Sam nor anybody else can make decisions aimed at destroying our economy. We'll find a way to eliminate this dependence. We should have done it long ago.
Since the start of the war, hundreds of civilians have lost their lives to Russian bombings. 2.8 million people have fled the war in search of safe zones. The 5 rounds of talks have so far failed to yield a ceasefire. Bureau Report, India Today.